Disney's Cruella, the novelization. Chapter 23. Inside the police station, Jasper lay on his back on a dirty cot. Across the cell, Horace lay on his own cot. The Baroness had been true to her word and had them arrested for Estella's murder. With the lair and inferno and the headlines already announcing her death, the police didn't question it. They locked Jasper and Horace up with only the vague promise of a trial. Blowing his nose, Horace rolled over and looked at Jasper.
"I can't believe she's dead,"
he said. Jasper couldn't believe it either. Images of Estella, the fun, feisty girl he had met years earlier, flashed through his mind. "Let's just remember Estella," he finally said, "and forget Cruella." Before he could say more, he heard a rumbling sound coming from outside. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Both boys sat up. The noise was getting louder. Out in the bullpen, the officers took notice of the sound as well. Looking out the front doors, one of the men shouted just as a huge dump truck slammed into the building. Glass and furniture went flying as police officers flung themselves out of the way. A moment later, the driver's side door of the truck opened. Cruella, dressed as a garbage man, complete with fake mustache, leaned out. As the officers regained their composure, they focused their attention on Cruella. They didn't notice Wink hop out of the cab and head inside. Giving the men a wave, Cruella got back in the cab and threw it into reverse. As the truck pulled out, the police jumped into their police cruisers and gave chase. Standing in his cell, fingers wrapped around the bars, Jasper listened to the chaos, unsure of what was happening. A moment later, he shouted happily as Wink trotted into view. Jumping to his feet, Horace joined Jasper at the cell door.
"Wink!"
Horace cried happily.
"You ain't barbecued!"
Jasper looked down at the little dog. No, he most certainly was not. And better still, he was carrying the keys to their escape. Tied to his back was a lock-picking kit. Reaching down, Jasper grabbed the kit and got to work while Horace showered his pup with pats. In seconds, the door swung open and Jasper and Horace walked out. In the chaos, none of the officers even noticed as the two prisoners made their way into the street. Night had fallen, aiding in their escape. It also helped that outside the station was utter mayhem. Cars were backed up and down the street. A huge pile of stinking garbage was lying in the middle of the road, blocking anyone from coming or going. Slipping into an alley, Jasper, Horace, and Wink walked quickly, putting as much distance between themselves and the station as they could. They had just turned down another dark street when a garbage truck pulled up beside them. It stopped, and Cruella rolled down the window. "Want a ride?" she asked, smiling. Jasper didn't return the smile. He had had a feeling the breakout was Cruella's doing, and for a moment he had been happy that his friend was still alive. But now that he had had a walk in the fresh air to think about it, he was angry all over again. The only reason they were in that spot in the first place was because of her. "We'll walk," he said. Horace was not upset.
"You're alive,"
he said happily, moving toward the truck. Jasper stopped him. "You nearly got us killed," he said, letting his anger out. "You treated us like the help." He nodded to his friend. "Keep walking, Horace." Thankfully, Horace didn't question him. They continued down the street. "You'll get caught by the cops," Cruella called out. "We did fine before you turned up," Jasper shouted over his shoulder. "We'll do fine without you." He knew his words were harsh, but he no longer cared. Horace, ever loyal, nodded.
"You called me imbecile," he added. "I don't know what that means, but I'm pretty sure it's bad."
"It's not terrible," Cruella said, though it didn't sound convincing. Jasper ignored her. He was tired and hungry. He wanted something to eat, and then he wanted to find a place to sleep. He headed toward a cafe. Behind him, he heard the garbage truck's engine rev, and a moment later, the vehicle pulled up beside him. Cruella stared down at them, her face awash in pain. Jasper hesitated. He had only seen her look this upset when she found out the truth about her mother's death. What had happened now? "There's no easy way to say this," she said, as if reading his silent question. "The Baroness is my birth mother." Jasper and Horace stopped in their tracks. struck silent by the revelation. A moment later, Horace spoke.
I have so many follow-up questions.
Jasper sighed. It looked like they were going to take that ride after all. Jasper and Horace sat on the couch in John's living room, a plate of crumpets lying uneaten in front of them. Well, mostly uneaten. Horace had helped himself to several. They had listened as Estella filled them in on what she had found out, the truth about what the Baroness had done, and the lengths she had gone to keep her hands on the Baron's money. The minute she knows I'm alive, Estella finished, she'll try to kill me. We're in a kill-or-be-killed situation here. Jasper shook his head. He felt bad for Estella, but he was still hurt.
She's a homicidal maniac, and you're not, he said.
We don't know that yet, Estella said, trying to lighten the situation. I'm still young.
Funny,
Jasper said flatly.
Or it would be funny if I was sure you were being funny.
Estella moved closer, and Jasper shifted away. She sighed. I am joking, she said, but we have to stop her. I have a plan, but I can't do it without you guys. Horace looked up, crumpet crumbs on his cheeks.
Finally, he said. She gets it. I'm essential to any plan.
Estella gave him a warm smile. I went a bit mad, and I'm so sorry, she said, her voice husky. Jasper could see she was trying to keep it together, and he started to soften. You're my family. All I have, she continued. The last of Jasper's resolve faded. Jasper sighed.
All right, he said. What's the plan?
Estella didn't hesitate. The Baroness's charity gala is this weekend. She paused to see if Jasper was listening. He was, even though he already didn't like the sound of this. We'll need all the guests' home addresses and measurements, Artie's tribe of dressmakers, a black cape, pots of paint, several bone corsets, and... Her list was interrupted by the arrival of John. Jasper stiffened. John, Estella said, clearly not surprised by his appearance. This is my family. They'll be staying a while. John nodded while Jasper looked back and forth between him and Estella. It had only been a night since the fire, and yet everything seemed to have changed. Well, almost everything.
You're out of crumpets,
Horace said, pointing to the now empty plate. Jasper smiled wryly at his friend's comment. Nothing fazed Horace. They ran way over their heads, and Jasper didn't like this plan, but at least for now he was going to have to go with the flow. They got right to work. John's flat became base camp. In a matter of hours, any sign of tweed or wood was replaced with colorful fabric, and every surface was covered with sewing material. Artie's band of merry dressmakers stood in front of dress forms, humming and chatting as they clipped, ripped, and pinned. A few people took notes as Estella barked out orders, the commander of the army. Every once in a while she would stop to check a dress or help with the pinning. The ultimate goal? Boxing up dozens upon dozens of dresses of her own design, each stamped with the House of Baroness label. While she took care of the clothes, John snagged the client files from the Baroness's office. It didn't take much to find them. The Baroness believed John had her best interests at heart, so she let him put away the paperwork. With files in hand and dresses made and packed, it was time for Jasper and Horace to play their part. They loaded the van up with the boxes, also embossed with the Baroness's logo, and made their rounds, stopping at estate after estate. Each time Horace got out and hand-delivered the beautiful box, and each time the woman who received the package squealed with delight as she opened the box, to find a one-of-a-kind gown and a note. Please wear this, with my compliments. In just a few days, the deliveries were done. The first part of the plan was complete. It was easy, Jasper thought, as he and Horace drove back to the flat, like taking candy from a baby. And that made Jasper nervous. Or rather, more nervous than usual. As the sun set on the night of the gala, Jasper made his way to Estella's room. The window was open, leading out to the small fire escape and the stairs to the rooftop of John's flat. Looking up, Jasper saw Estella perched on the brick wall, looking out at London's skyline. It was aglow in red and orange, and for once seemed peaceful. From the roof, the busy sounds of the street faded, and the air smelled fresher. "Hey!" he called up, climbing through the window, and joined her.
Big night.
Indeed it is. Jasper stared at her for a moment, wondering what she was thinking. Ever since the fire and discovering the truth about her mother, Estella had been different, more distant. He knew she had gone to see a lawyer about the Baron's will, but she hadn't said anything. Her focus had been completely on the gala.
You sure about this?
He asked. She nodded.
You know, you can't kill her, Estella,
he said, voicing the worry that had been in his head. She shrugged. Can't? Or shouldn't? This was not the response he wanted. Frustrated, he ran a hand through his hair and took a few calming breaths.
I know you're in pain, he said, and she caused it, but killing her isn't going to make that go away.
I won't, Estella said, for a moment sounding like his old friend. Jasper felt a flash of hope, but then she went on. Unless I really, really have to. Jasper sighed. He couldn't tell if she was being serious or not, but he could tell that his words were falling on deaf ears. Turning to him, she met his gaze, and her eyes softened. Thanks for helping me, she said quietly.
It's difficult to say no to you sometimes,
he admitted. It's one of the things I love about you, she said. Jasper flushed, unsure how to respond. Luckily, he was saved by the bell, or rather a honk. Looking down into the alley below, he saw Horace pulling up in the car they had stolen from the Baroness months ago. Horace had been fixing it up, and now it gleamed, black and white. Every inch was polished to a fine shine. Horace got out and waved up to them.
When I watched it, I noted the name, he said. You know what this car's called? A devil.
Jasper laughed.
It's DeVille, mate,
he said, correcting Horace. Horace shrugged, but Estella smiled. I like that, she said, jumping up. It was time. They had the ride. They had the plan. They were ready. Shall we go do this? Getting up, Jasper nodded. Like he had said, sometimes, even when he didn't like it, he just couldn't say no. To her.